Hello, welcome to Define American with Jose Antonio Vargas. I'm Jose. As we've spent the last couple of months preparing for the second Trump administration, it's become increasingly clear that many of my colleagues in the news media are simply not stepping up to the challenge that is covering immigrants and immigration in the Trump era.
I recently found out that there's a DC-based news operation that reports on politics with not a single full-time immigration reporter on staff. Are you telling me that we've elected someone president twice with immigration as the central campaign issue, and all we do is think of immigration as a political issue and not as a process?
There are exceptions to this. However, journalists, especially on television, are continuing to perpetuate Donald Trump's framing that the administration is going to prioritize locking up and deporting so-called criminals when we know from his first term that he targeted everybody, including families, and separated children from their parents at the border. And we know Trump is planning to target legal immigration and even naturalized citizens. Just yesterday, we're recording this the day after Trump's inauguration, he signed an executive order that would end birthright citizenship for children of non-citizens. And he also shut down the app that migrants use to apply to enter the U.S. legally as asylum seekers. Some of the footage of that has been heartbreaking to watch.
I waited 4 months in Tapachula. We were left in limbo. We don't know what to do. Really, the joy we had, it stops here.
And currently, there is no powerful political voice to challenge Republican attacks on the immigrant community, as even the Democrats have ceded much of the ground on this issue, attempting to pass a border bill last year that would have drastically increased funding for immigration enforcement. Here to talk to me today about all of these issues and more is the legendary Maria Hinojosa. She is the longtime anchor of over 30 years of Latino USA on NPR, and she's the show's executive producer. And she's also the founder of Futuro Media Group. She's a Pulitzer Prize winner, a Peabody Award winner, and today I'm so grateful that she's my guest on Define American. Maria, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Jose, and with your audience. Congratulations on building this great audience.
Well, and you know all about that, and we can go down there. Like, there's so much to talk about, and you know you're one of my favorite journalists and one of my favorite people to talk to. But I'm gonna start right here. Where were you during inauguration? Where were you in bed? Where were you? How were you processing inauguration?
I was making an incredible pot of chilaquiles with my 2 adult children and my daughter's husband, who's an immigrant from Ireland via London, and my son. His girlfriend was working the inauguration because she's a journalist. So I was busy being a mom. Frankly, I don't make chilaquiles all the time. It's kind of a big deal.
Yeah.
My kids were like, hey, can you make chilaquiles? And I was like, oh, they want chilaquiles. Let me be a mom and pamper them, without thinking like that's going to be happening while the inauguration is happening. And I kind of love that it happened that way, that I was doing what I want to do right now, which is taking care of people who I love. And the other important thing was that the day before the inauguration, I ended up seeing 2 eagles in flight above our little cottage in Connecticut, where I spend a lot of time. And 2 eagles in a love pursuit. And to me, to witness this, knowing that eagles were at one point almost disappeared, they were an endangered species, and yet here I am all of these years later, and I can look out of my home and see eagles. To me, this is the hope that we hold on to. This is the hope that we hold on to.
You know, we're taping this a day after the inauguration. And yesterday, during the inauguration, Trump signed a slew of executive orders targeting immigrants. By our count, of the 46 executive orders he signed, 9 target immigration or border security. So that's about like 20%. Even, as you and I both know, because we care about facts, even as illegal crossings fell steadily throughout 2024 and are now lower than when he left office 4 years ago. So far, he's trying to end birthright citizenship. He declared a national emergency at the border, at the southern border. He's vowed to militarize the border. He's attempting to bar refugees and asylum seekers from entering the country. I'm saying all this to say, Maria, so you've been covering, as a journalist, immigration as an issue for 30 years. Can you characterize this moment?
So I'm going to speak as a human first. It's a horror. It's an absolute horror to be witnessing this. So as a human, I'm just like, oh my God, my heart just breaks because so many people, and I was so worried about you. I'm less worried about you now, right?
We can talk about that.
But so many people who I'm profoundly worried about, people who I don't even know, communities that I visited, but within those communities, people who I have never met, who are going to be exposed to so much human suffering. But it's going to be horrible. We know it. It's not going to last forever, Jose. Those people who are going to be born and they will be in this, like, you're not going to get birthright citizenship. We know sooner or later they will have their American citizenship. I'm convinced. But these 4 years will be the hell, right, around that whole process. And for me, Jose, I've had to really kind of step back, think about not just these 4 years, but rather the centuries of this country, right? And the fact that this country has always been in this battle over justice, over rights. I don't like to say it, but confronting white supremacy straight up. So this is the history of the United States of America. And when we are gone, our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren will still have to be fighting similar battles. So that is something that it doesn't give me peace. But I understand, like, okay, here we go. But we're not stopping. And what you said at the beginning, right? This is the part that's hard as a journalist. This is the part that's hard, not as a human, but as a journalist. When I see my colleagues unable to understand that how they've been used, how they've been played, how they have fallen for the lies.
The framing.
And the framing. And, I suppose if I was completely uneducated about the issue and all I got was Trump's framing and then the Democrats' framing along with it, I might begin to say, oh my God, it's true. Oh my God, got to close the border. It's out of control. The problem is that it's not based on facts. And that's where it gets really, where it really hurts professionally, because our journalists, colleagues should have been doing a better job. And we've been trying. And, when we try, sometimes we're put in that box of like, oh my God, here they come. They're going to complain again. That Jose talking about immigration, that Maria always talking about immigration. Oh, stop.
Well, and actually, I'm curious from your perspective, has there been any difference between when Trump was first elected in 2016 in terms of the coverage of our colleagues on this?
Well, you would think after what we lived through with 4 years of Trump, that they would have sharpened their analytical tools precisely on the issue of immigration.
In a country, by the way, where there's 48 million immigrants, according to the Pew Research Center, 88% of the total population growth of this country is coming from those 48 million immigrants, which means the country is more Latino, more Asian, more mixed race. And yet, right, that's what's astounding to me, is the numbers are undeniable. The context is clear as day to see. And yet, I thought about you, by the way, on election night.
Yeah.
When election night happened, I can say this, I haven't talked to you about this personally, so we're going to talk about it publicly right now. when election night was happening, and it became very clear that the sleeping giant, I mean, since I've become a journalist, the Latino vote is the sleeping giant. Finally, the Latino vote was the real giant in this election. And then as I kept turning the channels,
Yeah.
I could not find a single Latina or Latino journalist.
Don't get me started.
Okay, actually, I'm thinking to myself, I almost texted you, but I was like, Maria, wait, like, why aren't you on TV right now explaining to people what's going on?
I don't know.
How did that feel, by the way?
Well, it's something that I've kind of dealt with for the entirety of my career.
Yes.
Right? So intense high visibility sometimes, but a lot of the time it's kind of like we don't really need to hear from her. You know, we kind of know what she's going to say. Why have her on? I don't know, Jose, because I'm not making the decisions about who's getting on television. But of course, I was like, I mean,
Just FYI, by the way, I was emailing bookers.
You're so adorable.
I was literally emailing MSNBC, CNN, going like, wait a second, like, wait, in the country where 66 million Latinos, more than half of those are of Mexican descent. In a country where, parts of the country used to belong to Mexico. Like, this is
how we get to where we are. Now, it's complicated, Jose, right? Because representation, which is so important to us, as we know, is not everything, right? So
not
Latinos and
everything,
Latinas
clearly.
were represented in the electoral map
Yes.
this time around. But Latinos and Latinas are also Americans. They're consuming all
we're
of the
consuming.
same mis and disinformation, and very specifically, Latinos and Latinas and those who are Spanish speaking predominantly were being targeted.
Yes.
Targeted very specifically with mis and disinformation. So to see Latinos and Latinas, the ones that I was interviewing in the whole year really, were just, all of them were saying, well, it's the economy.
By the way, your work and Paula Ramos's book, Defectors, if our colleagues in journalism should be watching kind of the evolution of how you've been reporting on this, what happened in election night should not have been a surprise.
Should not have been a surprise.
And here you saw a very dramatic shift, particularly among Latino men. See where he is in 2020 at 36% with Latino men 4 years ago. That is nearly 20 points difference as to where he ended up based on our early exit polls here this cycle.
But interestingly, the voters that I was talking to, Latinos and Latinas, were really focused on the economy. So I spoke to economists, right? I was like, can you tell me about this economy? And they were like, it's a great economy. Now, the U.S. and capitalism, there are a lot of contradictions.
Yes, of course.
In capitalist systems. So you can have a great economy with low unemployment, but also high inflation, which means high prices. Both things can be happening at the same time. But this targeting of you've got to vote for Donald Trump because he's going to fix the economy, he's going to fix the economy, he's going to get the price of eggs down, you're going to be able to pay your rent, you'll be able to buy your home. Okay, so they bought into that narrative. And the second narrative that they bought into, which, yes, when I would ask them about immigration, they'd say, oh my God. And I'm going to say it like this, kind of facetiously, but also because we're both actors, right? People that I'd be interviewing, they say, oh my God, please close the border. Please build the wall. Please shut the border now. We have to stop the immigrants. It's a disaster. And I'm like, are you not understanding what's happening here? So this was very sad. It was heartbreaking. It was horrifying. Again, the word horror coming up, because this I was not expecting at this level, that Latinos and Latinas, that immigrants themselves, Black immigrants, African immigrants, Caribbean immigrants, Asian immigrants, that they would all begin to believe this narrative. Now, the role of the journalist, one right there, has to be to challenge all the time, which they were not.
They were not.
And secondly, you have to have a party, the Democratic Party, right, that responsibly challenges those lies. And they did not.
Why do you think they did not?
Because I think that they, as usual with the Democrats, were like, oh my God, we've got to play it really safe and we've got to play to the middle. And so we too are going to say that immigrants are a problem and that immigration is out of control and that the wall needs to be solidified. We too are going to say that because we believe we need to get those center voters. And as I said, you can't out-Trump Trump on this. You can't say like, and the wall needs to be even taller. It's got to be taller than what Donald Trump is saying. You can't out-Trump him. What I continue to say, and I will, how do you say, I will die on the sword for this one, and I don't usually say that if they had gone straight up to immigrants are incredible, there will be mass legalization. Mass deportation, we're talking mass legalization because we know that you are not criminals. We know that crime is lower in your neighborhoods. We believe in immigrants. I see you, as Kamala Harris could have said, I see you because I am you. I believe in you. If they would have gone over the top with this extreme,
A real
fact-based,
but a real distinct.
a real distinction,
Yeah.
right?
It's funny you say that. I had that in mind when I was in your hometown. I was in Chicago reporting on this book that I'm finishing at the Democratic National Convention. Because, I used to be a political reporter, so I was hanging out with friends, but really I was out there. Oh my God, I'm blanking on the name of the neighborhood. I was in this
Pilsen.
one neighborhood.
No.
Not Pilsen. It was another neighborhood where the northern part is Mexican and the southern part is black. It was fascinating being in Chicago during the DNC when the first South Asian, first black woman who's a first generation American immigrant from both sides, and how it just was not. And actually, one of our first interviews in this podcast was Andrea Flores
Yes.
at Forward.us. The first day of the convention, I went just to see, because Forward.us hosted a symposium on immigration reform, the state of immigration reform. So they blocked out probably 500 seats. 15 people showed up. 15 people, including 4 black women,
Wow.
mostly educators, public school. One of them turned to me and said, "Where's everybody? Isn't this what he's going to win on?"
Wow.
So how did you process having this historic vice president at, again, first generation American from both sides, and Kamala Harris could not talk about it? How did you process that?
You know what? Being a woman of a certain age, right? Having interviewed the now president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum.
Groundbreaking.
Groundbreaking. But what's interesting, and in terms of Claudia Sheinbaum vis-a-vis Kamala Harris, is that Claudia Sheinbaum, and I'm not defending her. I mean, I'm suspect of all politicians. But if you look at the two, it's kind of like Claudia Sheinbaum is like stepping up to her feminist empowerment and like, I'm a woman, I'm leading this country, I'm going to surround myself with women. If you see her when she's like hoisting up the flag or if she's doing the salutes, it's all women soldiers who are leading the parades. Like she's like really owning this. Whereas Kamala was like, and this is difficult, by the way. I mean, great respect for Kamala Harris. No easy situation to be put into, right? But I always felt like she needed to go even deeper into that part of herself. That's what I kept on saying. That's why I wanted the interview with her, because I would have pressed her on this, which is, why are you not talking about this all the time and holding yourself up, your family, all of us as like, this is who we are. Give us another picture. And instead, in her big address on the border, when she spoke about immigration, right? I was with Chris Hayes. I was on live watching it and talking with him about this. So it took, 12, 15 minutes before she spent that entire top talking about fentanyl.
Securing our border also means addressing the flow of fentanyl into our communities. Fentanyl is a scourge on our country.
Fentanyl, drugs being transported, crime, drugs, etc. And then at about the 12 to 15-minute mark, she said, and I believe that there should be a pathway to citizenship.
And as president, I will work with Congress to create, at long last, a pathway to citizenship for hardworking immigrants who have been here for years.
And Chris and I both looked at each other like, wow, oh my God, she said it. I can't believe it. Pathway to citizenship. No, you lead with that. You want voters to believe in you? You want them to walk away from this narrative of literally hating themselves and their own? You have to give them something. So, people on social media think that I sometimes am a Trumpy because I'm so critical of the Democrats, but
Well, but again, the facts are the facts. I mean,
the facts are the facts.
I will never forget. I don't know if you remember this. I had gotten invited to host something with the White House. It was like a Zoom thing, and you called me. Do you remember this?
Of
You were like,
course.
Jose, what are you doing? Why are you being used by the White House? But again, you're a journalist. You're skeptical. We're born skeptical. The BS detectors. I mean, I will forever be thankful of being assigned to cover cops.
Right,
'Cause
right.
Your bullshit detector just goes up high about human behavior, right? And I'm bringing this up to say, your documentary, the Frontline documentary from 2011, Lost in Detention. I recently rewatched it, and it holds up in some ways.
But here's the thing, Jose.
Yeah.
Because you and I are both committed American journalists, right? And part of our tradition is deep investigative work that often should lead to resolution of the problem that we uncovered, right? Oh my gosh.
solutions.
Like 2011, Maria Hinojosa, Frontline, first time national television is allowed inside these detention camps. Our investigation into Willacy found that Mary's treatment wasn't unique. We uncovered many stories of racial, physical, and sexual abuse. What do they look like? What do they sound? Oh my God. Women are being raped. Women are being sexually assaulted. Men are being beaten. They're being over-drugged. They're being physically, mentally abused. Whoa. Shouldn't it get better? And here we are in 2025, and the situation for immigrants in detention has only gotten worse. So for me, Jose, I'm at a point, I will tell you, like, one of the things that's happened over the past couple of weeks is I'm managing, how to move forward. And I had this idea. I was like, okay, so I spent the entirety of my career approaching this with so much humanity because our hearts as journalists are key. Like Frederick Douglass, right? His heart was key in this work. And then I woke up a couple of, 10 days ago or 5 days ago, and I just said, okay, it's about numbers now. Now I'm going to talk to you about numbers. Forget the heart. We're still going to do that. We're always going to do journalism with heart. But now I want to tell American taxpayers on a weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, daily, how much of your dollars are being spent
To keep this border
to
secure.
keep all of this going, right? Let's see. Oh, so more money is spent on immigration, detention, and deportation, that whole industrial complex, than all federal law enforcement agencies combined.
And that's been the case
Combined.
now for at least a couple of decades.
Yeah, so people are like, wait, yes, more money than the FBI, more money than the firearms, tobacco police, more than the Justice Department police, like more money spent on hunting down immigrants who are no threat because they are not committing more crimes. I say this all the time.
All the facts say that.
If there was a crime problem the way that Donald Trump and all of his people in the entire campaign portrayed it, we would not have an immigration problem. We would have a crime problem out of control.
Yes.
And again, going to the data, crime has fallen in the United States over the last 30 years precipitously. Violent crime by 50%. So where is this crime? And again, our colleague journalists are just like, well, I don't know. They kind of look criminal, don't they? I mean, we don't speak the same language. And didn't they cross illegally? So aren't they already an illegal person? So doesn't that make them prone to? And it's like, no.
Again, just the following the. By the way, I mean, there was a New York Times poll that came out, I think, a couple of days ago that 55% of Americans polled want undocumented immigrants deported. 55%.
Yeah. So we have lost.
This is where the language of it, the framing of it, and now I have so many follow-up questions.
It's going to turn. It's going to turn, Jose.
Yeah.
This is not sustainable. So what's happening now is not sustainable. The shock and awe of the Trump
The shock and
administration
awe of it.
is not sustainable. It is to overwhelm us. But I will tell you something. In 2 years, there's going to be the midterms, okay? And in 2 years, I don't believe that the price of eggs or milk or bread or your rent will have come down precipitously. Already we know that the prices for medicines are going to be going up.
Are going up. Yep.
We know this. So I'm holding on, and I keep on telling myself this is going to be horrible for a lot of people and for us as journalists, as immigrant journalists, a particular challenge. But it's not going to last. You know, my favorite Mexican saying is, no hay mal que por bien no venga.
What does that mean?
No hay mal que por bien no venga. There is no bad from which good cannot come. There will be good that comes from this. It's going to be terrible. But the hitting of the rock bottom is going to lead to something else. What it is, I don't know. You know, sadly, the problem is, again, and I'm, you know, not a Democrat, Republican, that's not, but it's the Democrats to lose again. And they've been losing.
And I have to bring this up. I'm waiting for part 2 of the Obama memoir. Apparently, we're getting a part 2, and I'm really curious about how President Obama is going to talk about his immigration record and grapple with it. You know, he's so intellectually curious. He's a real writer. I mean,
Yes.
Barack Obama is
And
I
he's
remember
a constitutional
scholar who, you know, who was a student of Toni Morrison, who's, you know, so I'm really curious about that reckoning and that confrontation about, especially in Chicago, where the Latino population has overtaken the Black population, in which every single Latino or Latina in this country under the age of 45 knows exactly what happened during the Obama years.
Exactly.
And they're now going to be the majority of America. Can we talk about this a little bit? How do you think President Obama is going to grapple with this?
So, you know, I think Barack Obama is an incredible human being.
Oh, he is.
We went to school together. I believe I was at a party with Barack Obama when we were in college up at Columbia. I was at Barnard. I mean, he's a Hyde Parker from my community in Chicago, a South Sider. There's so much about Barack that I'm right there with you, Barack. This Barack, when you are a constitutional scholar and you knew and you went to sleep every single night of your presidency knowing that people like you and me, simply because we were not born in this country, could be denied all due process. Just like that. Because of our status of not being born in this country, we could be denied due process. Like all of the immigrants that are being picked up right now. How can you live with yourself, Barack, denying due process based on that? On birth, come on, that is now being discussed in our United States because of birthright citizenship denial, right? So I don't know. You know, I would love to sit down with Barack. I don't think he ever will.
Actually, wait a second. Let's just put that out there. President Obama,
Please.
would be a wonderful interview with Maria.
I would love it because I really like Barack, right? And I do really want to understand this because he must reckon with this. He must apologize.
Is there anything in the Obama library about this?
Oh, I don't know. But I don't, oh my gosh. I don't know. In Chicago, there's going to have to be. No, there has to be. But it cannot be that Barack Obama, whose father was a temporary immigrant, right? It cannot be that he doesn't talk about this. We need him. In fact, what I would have said to him when he was with Kamala is to take that moment to say, put his arm around Kamala and say, you know, Kamala, I made some mistakes here and I want to apologize because we know that immigrants are not criminals. And have him double down. We know immigrants are not criminals. We know immigrants are not criminals. Repeat, 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 repeat. I don't know how he sits with this. And the only thing is either to deny or to obfuscate, to not really dive in, or again, apologize.
And to be honest, I think he's too much of a writer not to grapple with this.
It's the biggest issue of his.
It's the biggest issue.
It is. How is it possible that both for Trump and Barack Obama that immigration would be the biggest issue.
And I'll never forget, I was assigned, because everybody thought I was Latino, and I have to keep telling them, I'm not Latino. But I got sent to New Mexico in 2008 during Super Tuesday because I was writing a story about how the older Latinos were for Hillary Clinton and the younger ones
Yes.
were for Hope and Change,
Yes.
were for Obama. And all those young Latinas and Latinos I interviewed in Albuquerque and Santa Fe were so excited to vote for the first, Black president of the country. So again, like there's just too much there not to unpack. And so I'm saying this, I'm including it here because I'm hoping maybe after this episode runs, I will email it to the people that we know and be like, hey, there's an open door with Maria.
An open door
Right.
because this is not, even though I'm very adamant and passionate about this, and I believe actually that when we make a mistake, we have to apologize. I mean, I just feel like as I get older and older, apologizing with earnestness really is important in your personal relationships, in your professional relationships, being able to just kind of own the mistake that you made. I mean, I can't remember now, but I know one time, more than once, I put something out there that was not true. Or I made a factual mistake, right? Immediately I go and I'm like, okay, this just happened. I'm apologizing.
Yeah.
In other words, don't let it linger, right? You apologize. You look it straight there and say, okay, this happened. So for Barack, if the Democrats really attempt to try to win 4 years from now, this is the issue that they've got to win on in a positive.
And now having said that, like the rationalization around, especially with this election, you have Latino and Latina voters, more percentage voting for Trump. You have Asian American voters voting for Trump. How have you been processing that? You said it already. They're in America, right?
Yeah.
They're in America.
Yeah.
So, whiteness is ideological.
Okay, I was like...
It's not just physical. It's ideological.
Absolutely. So I ended up writing an essay that I tried to get published everywhere. Like I sent it to all the usual suspects that would, like an op-ed from a Pulitzer Prize winning journalist.
Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, wait a second. Not just that. I think the most decorated Latina journalist in the country.
I love you, Jose.
No, but wait a minute. But that's factual.
That's so
I'm saying
sweet.
that. It's true.
Oh my God, that's so sweet. I would have never thought of it that way. And I don't care about that, but I'm just,
I know
like
you
when
don't,
I'm
but-
sending something to the New York Times, like possible op-ed from Pulitzer Prize winning journalists, I don't know, like maybe you would respond, like thank you, nice attempt, no thank, nada, zero. So I ended up publishing it myself, actually, on our site. And what happened, Jose, was that I went on with Jonathan Capehart on MSNBC, and it was before the election, and he threw me the question. He was like, you got 10 seconds, answer the question, why are Latinos voting for Donald Trump? And I was like, well, they want to be white. And Breitbart took that, put it out there and said, NPR anchor, MSNBC contributor says Latinos just want to be white. And it was like, oh my God, you're simplifying. When I wrote what I wrote is growing up, I don't know if you've ever heard this term, in Mexico, growing up as a little girl, when there was a new baby being welcomed into our family in Mexico, they would say, ay, qué bueno, mira, salió blanquita porque hay que mejorar la raza. Oh my God, look, she came out a little white. So it's good, we're gonna better the race. Hay que mejorar la raza. We're gonna better the race. Jose, I was hearing this as a little girl.
Wow.
And you're like, what does that mean? Because also I'm growing up in Chicago, like on the South Side with black people
Yeah,
everywhere,
with
my
black people
neighbors.
everywhere.
What does this mean, mejorar? Okay, they don't want us to be indigenous, but then they also don't want us to be black. So what am I saying? When you come to this country, especially in this particular moment, which we have to study what the Republic, what MAGA did in terms of mis and disinformation, but you find yourself saying, well, gosh, if I'm going to have to identify with one, I'm not going to identify with the immigrants who they say have committed crimes or everything. I'm going to identify with MAGA. Because, I mean, isn't Donald Trump everything that I'm supposed to want here in the United States? I mean, he's white, he's a man, he's wealthy, he's powerful, he's a bully. I mean, I want to be that.
Talk about machismo.
talk about machismo. Hence my question that I asked last year. So which country is more machista? Mexico? That just elected a president? A woman president?
Before the United States?
Or the United States? Which country is more machista, right? So again, it was the Democrats to lose because they were not responding to that narrative with something else. So that narrative just sat there, and you had immigrants, Asian, Black, Latino, who were like, "Oh, yeah, I don't want those criminals coming in. I don't want them coming in." It's like, well, who wants criminals coming in? But again, they're not. They're lying because the data shows that immigrants are less criminal than U.S. citizens. Period. Repeat and repeat and repeat, and they did not.
I have to tell you, like, even listening to you say that you had now I want to see it. I'm going to go to the web. I have not read it, so I'll go to the website and I'll read it. So we live in a country where there's 68 million Latinas and Latinos, right? In the state of California, the fourth largest economy in the world, 40% of California is Latino.
And 30% of all Latinos in the United States live in the state of California.
I'm not talking about a minority group. I'm talking about the majority.
Correct.
So the fact that this to me is what I'm really struggling with when we talk about immigration is the kind of, we're not talking about the appetizer. We're not actually the hors d'oeuvres.
Correct.
Like, this is the entree. This is the conversation. And then to see it always being sidelined, and that's what I'm struggling with our colleagues, is to say, wait a second, the dots have to be connected here. The state of California is 60% Latino and Asian. When you talk about birthright citizenship, that's what we're talking about.
Right.
Right? And then for me, because you and I talk a lot about Frederick Douglass, I will never forget. I mean, I almost teared up when you said to me, you're an American journalist in the tradition of Frederick Douglass. And I'm sitting there looking at you, just like 10 years ago now. And I thought to myself, of course Malia would do that. And then connecting the dots between what Black people have been fighting for in this country, what Black people have been calling bullshit on in this country from the very beginning.
Correct.
If Latinos and Asians don't understand what that is the choice here, right? And it was fascinating after the election, all the Black women that, mentored me at the Washington Post 24 years ago were like saying to me, Jose, we tried.
You want to know when my heart really broke and when I got profoundly worried?
Yeah.
Was when in my own community in Harlem, when I began to hear whisperings, the livery cab driver saying things like, oh no, they need to seal that border. Or my neighbors beginning to repeat the narrative of immigration is out of control. This was heartbreaking for me.
Of all races, of like what backgrounds?
Mostly Black American.
So that was my experience in Chicago when I was there reporting.
Yeah. So again, you either look at that straight up and you respond by giving fact, or you lose your way and you just let them continue to maintain the narrative.
So I was interviewing this kid. He was I ended up having gotten on his lift twice for some reason, right? So I guess he looked me up after the first conversation and then goes, "Oh, it's you." And then he goes, "Hey, I'm sorry, you're still illegal." And then I said, "Oh, I'm undocumented." This was back in August. And then this kid, he was 26. He goes, "Well, I'm sorry that you're not a citizen, but I'm a citizen, but sometimes I don't feel like one."
When we look at the numbers, Donald Trump did not win a mandate.
He did not. Wait, let's repeat that again, because I think our colleagues forget this.
I was on television, whatever it was, a couple of days ago, and I said this, and I was like, wow, I realize that I'm saying something that is kind of fact-based, but not a lot of people are saying this. And it's like, he did not win a mandate. So can we stop talking about this as if he's just going to come in with a bulldozer, he's going to try. But it's not correct what he's attempting to do. The narrative that he is spinning, which is, I am the man now because I won overwhelmingly, and so I'm going to reset the narrative of the United States. And it's like, no, you didn't. So for our colleagues, again, to continue to be fact-based on this. And we've got our work cut out for ourselves.
So let's talk about that now. What does stepping it up look like for our colleagues? Here we are. Clearly, Stephen Miller has done his homework. He was prepared and ready to go this time around, right? And we're seeing that. They're going to flood the zone, right? I mean, there was that quote from Stephen, I think it was Stephen Bannon. He said that the Democrats don't matter. The real opposition is the media. And the way to deal with them is to flood the zone with shit. Basically, overwhelm them with so much information, so much misinformation, that they can't effectively do their job of sifting through fact and fiction.
The thing is that actually your role and responsibility as an American journalist is precisely to do that. And you know, we journalists are a competitive bunch. You know that.
Yes.
And I love to say this to our colleagues in the mainstream media, our colleagues with the newsrooms of the big newspapers. And I say, if your newsroom is not at all representative, then you are not practicing excellence in journalism. I remember
It's irresponsible journalism.
it's just not excellent.
It's irresponsible.
So that's why I say precisely excellence in journalism, because I want them to be like, yes, we are nice. No. So it's not only a matter of representation, right, but empowering those people within our newsrooms that are highly competitive, overwhelmingly white, right, male, that would say, no, we actually need you to speak up because we need to make sure that this perspective, that what's happening in immigrant communities, that how immigrant journalists understand their communities and their reporting. We need you. We want you. We need to hear from you. That's very different than what happened. And we're bearing the consequences of it, Jose. And this is a real challenge, because we should be on the same page as journalists. We should absolutely be on the same page, which is fact-based, fact-based, fact-based. Don't accept their lies. Don't accept their pomp and circumstance. I mean, Jose, I don't think you or I are necessarily religious, spiritual, yes, but when you're being sworn in as president and you don't put your hand on the Bible, so Donald Trump does not follow protocol, disrupts protocol, wants to disrupt it. So what is our role as journalists? Is to follow our protocol the way we always have because that's what we do? No. If he's not playing by the rules, then why do we continue to play by these rules, which for our white male colleagues overwhelmingly are, well, we have to do both sides, and, well, we have to be representative, and we have to, be objective and play to the middle. No, actually. You have to be smarter than that. You have to be much smarter than that. And then we get to the whole issue of people like you and me challenging mainstream media, right? Saying, but you need to do better. And then they're like, that sounds a little revolutionary to me.
Yeah. Well, but if you think about the history of this country, I'll never forget when, as you know, I got detained in Texas 10 years ago. And John Lewis, because he's a great man, he was one of the people who called. And he thought it was a stunt.
Oh, my God.
I was like, oh, no, sir. No, it wasn't supposed to happen. He goes, oh, it doesn't matter. The woman at the Starbucks today, she had a stroller. And I heard her talking about, did you hear about that guy that got arrested? He was trying to board a domestic flight. I didn't know that you needed documentation to board a domestic flight. And he goes, you did your job. That woman that otherwise would not have been talking about immigration was talking about immigration.
So,
and then he said, this is the
Yes,
bigger point.
yes.
Then he said, Selma, Jose, was a media play. Our job was to get the New York Times, the Philadelphia Inquirer, and the Baltimore Sun to go to the South, go to Alabama, and call it what it was.
and see it
And see it.
with their own eyes.
So I think a lot about that. Isn't that fascinating?
So part of the thing that's happening now with Donald Trump and his mass deportation is, and it's the next essay that I'm thinking about writing, which is, so mass deportation has become this huge public conversation or just public threat, right?
Yeah.
But actually, the process of deportation is incredibly intimate, lonely, and solitary, and shameful, right? So you're going to have so many people who should be telling their story of, my mom got detained, or my uncle or my dad got detained, but they are not, because there's so much shame that we carry now because of the whole framing of immigration, right? That people will not tell these stories. And there will be shame and silence about this moment of mass deportation, right? When what we should be doing is getting these stories out. Why is it that immigration and celebrating immigrants and celebrating our immigrant stories is not part of what our kids are doing in grade school? Why? Maybe at your school, the school that's named after you, right?
Actually,
but why isn't this happening? Why has it been that immigrants are thrown under the bus by Republicans and Democrats alike? Why is it that we are the simple target? Why? And then again, if we look to our colleagues in the news media, why is it that they fall for this yet again? One of the things that's been so hard is in the lead up to the election, right? Trying to get on TV, because I try. I'm a contributor to MSNBC. I still have to push. Hey, I'm available. Hey, call me. Hey, I get that. Like, that's our job. I understand that. But the feeling of we were not doing the intense coverage on immigrants, on what mass deportation could look like. We were not talking to immigrants all the time. Now we are. After Donald Trump won, now it's like, oh, immigration this, oh, immigrant this. Not that they're putting more of us on, but they're talking more about the issue. But they're talking about it in such a scientific way, or just like a kind of cold way. How where will people be? Where will the buses be deployed? Where will the tents be set? And it's just like you needed to have done this kind of intense coverage on this issue for the past year. Maybe it could have avoided getting us to this place. Because ultimately, Jose, sadly, even though our careers have been dedicated to this, regular Americans, right? We travel across the country, I meet them. I do believe they have good hearts and that they are good intentioned. But when they are fed this diet constantly, very specifically about immigrants, yeah, they're going to fall for it. And you're looking at me and I'm thinking, you know what? 25 years ago, 30 years ago, what was the big threat, the domestic threat that everybody was talking about? I'm going to use a term which is a derogatory term. So I've alerted people. Oh, the super predators.
Yeah, super predators.
Black men. That was the Willie Horton. That was it. That was the fear. Oh my God, black men, black women. Oh my God, black communities. That was what, crime is out of control from black people. And what we haven't been able to understand is that it's just targeted here.
It's targeted here. It's moving.
And it's staying here.
Now, I have to ask you two questions. And then, unfortunately, we could go on and on and on here. But one question is, what is your message to immigrant journalists? As I was saying, you are probably the most decorated immigrant journalists in America.
You're so sweet.
But what is your message to those immigrant journalists who are Latino, Latina, Asian, Black immigrant, who's sitting there afraid to pitch the story because they're going to be boxed in? Or what do you want to say to them at this moment?
That they should not give up, that they should find their elders, because now both you and I are the elders, right? I mean, this is what I tell all young American journalists: just don't give up, please. We need you. We need you desperately. And if you are an immigrant journalist, it's not an easy thing to walk into the newsroom and just be like, I'm a proud immigrant, by the way. I got you in terms of that voice. I got you. We don't like this, right, necessarily, but that is part of our job now. We have a historical mandate, if you will, to be more present, more vocal, more determined than ever before in our newsrooms.
We owe that to the moment, and we owe that to history.
Yeah, we do. And again, there is a great tradition of journalism of conscience in the United States.
Yes.
Let us not forget that. You and I are part of that tradition. And immigrant journalists and non-immigrant journalists, right? Great white male journalists they are also journalists of conscience. That is what we need to hold
And by the way,
up.
that's what happened. White journalists from the North went to the South, during the civil rights movement and called it what it was. And I keep waiting for that moment. And then again, this is the last question I was going to ask you is, when I first started this journey, publicly saying that, hey, I'm here legally, I'm telling the truth, I'll never forget. I was doing an event in Alabama. I was at the airport, and this woman just like runs after me and goes, I am so happy you're not Mexican. I was like, what? She read the essay. She's a lawyer, Mexican-American woman lawyer. She read it, and she didn't see the picture, right? And she goes, ugh, Jose Antonio Vargas, of course, Then she sees the picture. Oh, he's not Latino. She said that, I'm so glad that there's someone talking about immigration and someone talking about being undocumented who's not Latino.
Yeah.
And I'm saying this to ask you, what is your, in this country right now, Mexican Americans in this country are the dominant ethnic group in America. The only analogy is the Germans in the 19th century. That's why in this country, by the way, that's in this book that I'm finishing. The only analogy are the Germans in the 19th century.
Wow.
We sell more tacos and hamburgers. We have more taquerias than burger joints. This country is a Mexican country.
Well, that's what President Claudia Sheinbaum
Right.
said.
And yet, the anti-Mexican rhetoric. So, and my worry about this is what happens when that goes inside. When all of a sudden people actually young Mexican Americans in this country start believing in that. What is your message to that? And this is from someone who blurbed and read Once I Was You, your book that people should read.
Thank you, sweetie.
What is your message to those Mexican Americans?
So we already saw the worst thing that could happen, right? Which is that we would turn on our own. And I kind of, because you and I, you're Filipino, I'm Mexican, like we're not related in any way, and yet we're brother and sister, right? Yes. We feel this way. So when I say turning on our own, it makes me uncomfortable. But for this precise moment, Uvalde. And Jose, we haven't talked since I went to Uvalde, but there's a Maria Hinojosa before and after 9/11. There's a Maria Hinojosa before and after Uvalde. And so what happened in Uvalde was, in fact, this boy, Latino, child of Mexican immigrants, right, who had all kinds of issues, no doubt, but then internalized all of that self-hatred so much that he would go and shoot up his own classroom. All of these little kids, 19 angelitos and angelitas, looked just like him. This was my horror. This was that, oh my God, please don't let it happen. It happened. So what's it going to take to walk this back? I don't know. You lay out all of the statistics and the numbers about Latinos and Latinas in the United States. It should have been a moment in which we rose to represent justice, right, and representation and equality. And instead, with my Mexican brothers and sisters, they were tending to believe Donald Trump. So how do we walk this back? I don't know, because I've never been in a position like this. But I continue to say it's not sustainable. Right?
It's not.
It's not sustainable. And, apart from being a journalist, well, I'm a Mexican immigrant, so I have 16 different jobs. We're always working. And I'm a professor at Barnard at my alma mater. And so I'm in a classroom with young people every week. And I remember the protests after the murder of George Floyd, may he rest in peace. I remember those protests. I remember the Women's March. I remember, how people in this country have turned out and turned up. So that is still there. That part of America, which for Dolores Huerta, right, is always able to be organized, right? Yeah. They're there. And I still have hope with young people. I really do. It's not their fault that they were barraged with misinformation. The fault is the fact that there was no one as big as MAGA responding to that. And you know what, Jose, with all of the intelligence that we have in the United States of America, oh my God, such intelligence, international intelligence, domestic intelligence. And it's like, you couldn't see the mis and disinformation being aimed at Latinos and Latinas, like targeted. You couldn't see that. You didn't think it was important enough to respond to it. Shame on us.
On us.
Shame on us.
Well, I have to say, we have to wrap, but there's this Cornel West I was watching this video of Cornel West talking about James Baldwin, and he was saying that it's not enough to have hope, you have to be a hope. And in all of your hopefulness, I think that is what you are. You are not just giving hope, you have been a hope. So thank you for that, Maria, and thank you so much for joining us.
You too. You're my hope as well. Thank you, Jose. I'm so honored to be here with you, honestly. Thank you.
You're welcome.